Good evening, good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of Brilliant Parents and Hillingdon Council, a very warm welcome to you all, and thank you so much for your patience. Technology, what can I say? My name is Meave Daru, and I am the Chief Executive of Brilliant Parents. I'm delighted to be here hosting this invaluable event for Hillingdon parents entitled How to Navigate the Social Care System. I firstly want to congratulate all Hillingdon parents who are here today. For some of you, this might be the first time that you've ever had any kind of engagement with the council, and you have had to maybe step out of your comfort zone, as it were, to be here with us this evening. But going back to the title of this event, what do we actually mean by navigate? Well, to navigate means to go from point A to point B. And it might be that you want to improve your parenting skills. It might be that you want to seek out some counseling for your teenager. It might be that you want to have your child assessed for additional needs. Brilliant Parents and Hillingdon Council can help you to do just that. And my hope is that after this evening, that you will feel more inspired and empowered to help us work with you, to support you. The team here at Brilliant Parents, well, we're passionate about parenting and supporting those parents who have challenges with their children's emotional and behavioural needs. And the way that we work is that we actually have two models of delivery. We have the traditional method of delivery, which is by using Triple P. Triple P stands for Positive Parenting Programme. And it's evidence-based, it's internationally acclaimed, and we basically run courses for between 6 to 8 weeks. So a parent would attend every week for that period of time. On the other hand, we have another model of delivery where we have our volunteer parent champions. And those parent champions work with parents, particularly those whose children are at risk of exploitation. They work with those parents to, again, help them go from point A to point B. So there is a choice. If you are a Hillingdon parent today, I know you might be a little bit nervous, a little bit skeptical. You may have some preconceived ideas about Hillingdon and the council and how they work. And as I say, my hope is that this evening is going to be informative and it will improve your understanding of the roles of the different departments within social care, so that, as I say, you feel more encouraged to reach out and to seek help, because it's important that you understand that seeking help for your children is actually a strength. It's not a weakness. So with that said, I'd like to introduce some housekeeping rules that will help this evening run well. We have had over 150 people register to attend tonight. So to try and keep the next 2 hours run as smoothly as possible, what we're asking you to do is to write your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We are asking you, if you wouldn't mind, putting the name of the panelist that you would like to answer your question. And hopefully throughout the evening, if they see their name there, they can actually type in the answer for you there and then. After we've had our first three speakers, we'll ask Carla if she's got some more questions from the Q&A. And then at the end, hopefully, if we've got a few minutes, again, we will answer some more questions. But most importantly, all those questions not answered, we will then get the answers from each of the panelists and email you next week. So that's what's going to happen. And then finally, in terms of the evaluation, you will get an automated evaluation at the end of this event. And we do ask that you complete that evaluation to give us a sense of whether or not this evening has really had an impact and whether it's been of benefit to you. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, which is Julie Kelly. Julie is Director of Service Delivery for the Children and Young People Services at Hillingdon Council. Julie has been a qualified social worker for over 20 years. She started her social work career in Glasgow, where she initially worked in youth work, criminal justice, and then with children and families. She relocated to Birmingham in 2003, where she undertook a variety of local authority roles across the West Midlands. These included managing assessment, social work services, and disabled children's services. Before coming to Hillingdon, she worked for Couth for 8 years, where she was head of practice across the West Midlands. She's been in Hillingdon since July 2017, and her career has been dedicated to making a positive difference for children and their families. Outside of work, she is a parent to 5 grown-up children and soon to be 4 grandchildren. The best feedback she's had was from a member of staff who advised her that she always takes the work seriously, but never takes herself seriously. So, Julie, can I ask you to come forward? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maeve, and welcome everybody. It's really exciting to have so many people on the call, but it is a wee bit daunting. This isn't my usual audience. My usual audience is social workers, so be gentle with me. Thank you for the introduction. I think you probably don't need to know anything more about me, apart from I'm not related to Lorraine Kelly, even though we sound a wee bit the same and we come from the same area of the world. As Maeve said, I'm responsible for children and young people's social care services in Hillingdon. Now those services are really broad, and I don't have time in the slot that I've got to go through all these. So I thought it would probably be best if we just tackle the elephant in the room first. And the thing that often stops people seeking help is, I don't want to accommodate your children. I think let's just put that out there first and foremost. And for most people who aren't involved in our world, the day-to-day in social care and social work, when you think about children's social care services, usually the first thing that pops into people's minds is things that they've seen in the mainstream media, where things have gone terribly wrong for children, where children have been harmed. Or you may see things in social media around social workers removing children and social workers forcing adoptions in the family court. While safeguarding and child protection is undoubtedly and unashamedly part of the work that we do, it's a really small part of the work. And to help me illustrate that, usually in every month we have about 2,500 young people and their families that we provide a range of services to. Of that, only around 10% are actually children that require child protection plans. And an even smaller portion of them, only less than 2%, actually result in care proceedings and children being removed from their family home. For me, that's a good news story, because it tells me that actually 90% of children, even those that we see as being at the highest risk, end up not coming into our care or being subject to court proceedings. So actually, with a bit of help, a bit of support and a proper plan, then parents are enabled to provide good care and support for their children at home. So that's a small bit of the work, but that's the bit that gets the big news and the bit that the public hear about. There's another part of the work where we have children who are looked after, so children who are in the care of the local authority. Again, in Hillingdon, we have very low numbers, just over 300 children looked after, and comparatively across other local authorities, that is lower. But actually a quarter of our children that are looked after are unaccompanied asylum-seeking children that have come in from Heathrow. So that brings the number of local children that are accommodated in Hillingdon is actually quite a low number. Now, there could be a number of reasons for that, and I'm sure there is. There isn't just one reason, but I would like to think that part of that story is because we do have a range of good preventative services, good family support services that help parents look after their children and keep them safe at home. So I thought, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. I don't want your children. I'll do anything I possibly can not to look after your children, and we only look after children where there's no other possible solution to that. So I suppose the next bit is, well, what on earth are we doing with those other 2,000 children and their families month in and month out? Well, we're working in partnership with parents and with our colleagues, some of which are on the call today, with our schools, with our police colleagues, to provide support. And the range of that is huge. It could be from signposting into our children's centres to enable parenting classes, to refer to our commission services such as Brilliant Parents for their P courses, or for support from a parenting champion. It could be support for disabled children. We also have really good key working services who work with parents quite intensively on a weekly basis where there's identified as a need. And again, that can be around routines and boundaries. It could be managing challenging behaviour, particularly if your child has additional needs. And then we have a whole range of other services, early help and preventative, really focused on adolescent children. We know that adolescence is a risky time, full stop. It's even riskier because adolescents don't realise that there's risk there. Their brains don't allow them to do so. We know that that's not their fault, but we need to provide services and support to parents and those young people. So for the past 2.5 years, we're really focused on strengthening that support. Initially strengthening the support we offered to young people, because in the main they didn't really want to work with us. And you'll have Kelly Johnson a bit later on as a social worker in our specialist adolescent team. But that's also supported by a wide range of early help and targeted programmes delivered specifically for young people. So that can be from counselling for emotional and mental health. It could be around substance misuse if your young person is using alcohol or drugs. It can be around sexual health if they're sexually active or involved in risky relationships, and a range of other programmes. We also have an early help offer for children that are on the edge of exploitation, where we are identifying early where they have associations or risks or parents are highlighting to us, so that we can go in and do some diversionary work. That's just a wee bit of a snapshot really of what we do. So it's not just about child protection, it's not just about looked after children and children in care. But I suppose as a service and as a local authority, we know, and as a person, that parenting is probably one of the most difficult jobs in the world. In the best of circumstances, at the best of times, it's a bumpy journey for us. And I think probably we've not had a bumpier time than we've had in the last year. And we know that additional support is really needed. And if I get anything out of this webinar, and you do, it's hopefully that you won't feel fearful to approach social care or whoever it is, if it's a head teacher in your school or somebody else that you think that you need support in a referral, that you won't feel fearful, you'll feel more confident that actually we're here to work with you, identify the best support, and hopefully help you, empower you and help you be a better parent. And it doesn't matter how experienced you are. And speaking from my own experience, child number 1 is always completely different from child number 3. So just because you've done it before doesn't mean that there won't be any bumps in the road. I know that we're short on time, and I've got until 5:15, so I'm keeping my eye on the time. But I look forward to answering any questions that you may have afterwards. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for giving up your tea time to come and listen to us tonight.
Thank you very much, Julie. That's really interesting. And as Julie said, the good news is she doesn't want your children, and she'll do anything she can not to have your children. So that's worth remembering. So thank you very much indeed. Okay, our next speaker is Carol Jones. Carol is a head teacher from Yedding Junior School and an experienced head teacher who is passionate about working with the wider community and partner organisations for the further development of children. She has introduced character education into the school, including a set of virtues which are embedded in the ethos and threaded across the curriculum. The school has most recently gained Kite Mark Plus as a school of character, and she is a trustee of a local organisation and actively promotes volunteering and social action within the school. In her role as head teacher, she chairs Standing Advisory Council on Religious Education and a theme group in her local authority, and attains the Safeguarding Partnership. She is a co-contributor to a book entitled Whole School Character and Virtue Education, a pioneering approach helping all children to flourish. The school has established a resource known as the Community House, where parents can access courses and support, including working with social work students on placement. Carol, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's really good to be here to be looking at this theme through the lens of a school. We have a vital role to play in the lives of children, in their well-being, in their mental and physical health, and in their general way of learning within school. Our role is to enable the children to thrive and flourish, which is, again, I can echo something Julie said, which is a challenge in the current situation. But that's our main thrust. We establish strong and supportive relationships with our parents. And I think it's really important that we encourage our parents to gain so much, to be able to look at things and pull things apart and understand the journeys for their children. I too speak about that as a parent of grown-up adults. So it isn't easy, I can echo that. So we have established a community house with a dedicated homeschool worker who sets programs and courses for parents. And there's a whole manner and raft of courses to help parents understand systems, to help them perhaps understand why their child is behaving in a particular way. We have dedicated coffee mornings for parents who might otherwise feel isolated. We have opportunity for children to access counselling. We regularly liaise there as well as in school and collaborate with wider professionals and partners who work with families in the best interests of the children. The heart of what we do is to get the best for the children and to ensure that they're safe. Schools have a duty of care to all the children within their care. Keeping children safe is the responsibility of all of us who work within school. As mentioned earlier, our duty of care goes way beyond learning. Our duty of care is embedded in our teachers' standards, and it's a statutory responsibility, and it's a desire for all teachers to do so. During the school day, teachers work in loco parentis, in the place of parents, and they make decisions in a way that any reasonable parent would make. Teachers have the responsibility to listen to the children, and to listen to the children and be sort of in tune with the children to know what's going on for them and to respond to any of their concerns. We also have a responsibility to act on any concerns that we may have in relation to a child. I have to say, most children come happily into school on a daily basis, and they confidently interact with their peers and the staff within school, and they take a full and active part in school life. But that's not always the case. Teachers use their knowledge and acquired safeguarding skills to ensure that children can thrive. All children can thrive. They have a responsibility to protect children from any foreseeable harm or risk, and a duty to follow professional working standards. Teachers have regular training in education, and particularly in that area of supporting and protecting children. All school staff have a duty, whether teacher or whoever works in a school, to ensure they follow the policies and procedures and national guidance that's laid out. They're made aware of all the national and local updates, as well as groups and agencies that can support the families. Each school has at least one designated safeguarding lead who have particular training. These staff also attend sessions within the local authority to be able to develop their skills further. Going back to teachers again in the classroom and going back to all of us who work in school, children come to school on a daily basis, and we're acutely aware when they seem different, or they're not thriving, or they're not flourishing, or maybe they're worried about something, and maybe we become worried about their attendance or their inability to focus. As with most schools, we have more than just teaching staff. We have staff who have a range of other abilities who work within our schools. In our school in particular, we have learning mentors, we have a homeschool worker, and we have a part-time social worker who works in school. And this team works very closely with parents to ensure that parents have a clear understanding for what's going on with their children and how they can support them. Sometimes the parent might come to a homeschool worker regarding issues around attendance. They may come and talk about free school meals. They may have a housing issue that's impinging on the world of their child. Parents are often signposted to local groups that can offer direct support for them. This is always done, I have to say, in a confidential and transparent way. As necessary, the school will link with other agencies, such as the participation team around attendance, or the school nurse, or the police, or may seek to set up a team around the child to be able to, or a team around the family to be able to be more supportive. Sometimes the children themselves have friendship issues, or there may be loss or bereavement. Generally, interventions are set up by that internal team to support, and parents are always engaged with us. The school also works closely with social care when a family may require some additional support. I think we heard a little earlier about key workers. So sometimes a child might require a key worker, a family might require a key worker. And, you know, this is down to agreement with other partners. These interventions that are put in place are designed to stop any escalation. Our school does have social work students on placement. We're very proud of that. And our parents know that the children aren't going to be disappearing anywhere too. And we're very proud of talking about that as well. And the social workers on placement will act as key workers for the children with agreement with parents. And they work with attendance and they work with other issues. And they also set up workshops for parents on a range of things. It might be looking at online safety and where children are having difficulty with that, or it may be behavioural issues. Sometimes it may be necessary to call social services. So when do we do that? In a situation where the DSL, the designated safeguarding lead, or maybe the head teacher, are concerned about the welfare of a child and feel that the child may be at risk of harm, or maybe in the future at risk of harm, a referral is completed with social care. The school will advise the parent of any call that we make to social services unless we're advised otherwise not to do so. So there may be a time when a school is concerned about a raft of things that have suddenly come to light. For the referral to take place, it's either been as a result of a discussion with a teacher expressing a concern, or another member of staff expressing a concern, or it may be concerns that children have brought themselves. Maybe they're disclosing something about their world that we're concerned about. It's important that schools collaborate with others, but it's also important that schools collaborate with parents and that we're very transparent with the parents and very open with the parents so they understand the journey we're taking and the reasons behind that. Any such referrals or subsequent engagement with other services are always kept confidential within school and only shared on a need-to-know basis. I believe that we work really closely with services within the local authority and particularly with social care. And I'm very proud that we do that. And I'm also very proud that we also work with parents in support of their children to protect them, and work with organisations and agencies that can support the whole family. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. That was great. I think one of the things I picked up on is that basically the school is there not just for the academics of our children, but also for their emotional health. And I think that's really important, that as parents, we know that they're really being looked after in a way that, you know, we would want, really. So thank you very much for that. Our next speaker is Kelly Johns, and Kelly Johns is a social worker at Hillingdon. She's employed by the Vulnerable Adults team, and she works with supporting teenagers aged 11 to 18 years of age who are impacted by difficulties such as family breakdown and exploitation. She says that they're a team that work intensively with young people, and they take a relationship-based approach and visit more often to try and support positive change. And prior to being a social worker, she worked as an intensive family support worker. Welcome, Kelly.
Hi everybody. So as mentioned, my name's Kelly Johns and I'm a social worker employed within the Vulnerable Adolescents team for the London Borough of Hillingdon. The team that I work for specifically works with young people 12 years of age and over who are at risk of criminal or sexual exploitation, going missing from home, serious youth violence or family breakdown. I've been working as a social worker for just over a year now, and prior to this I was a family support worker for several years. I'm here today really to give you an overview of some of the things that can be expected if your child is allocated a social worker, or if a referral is made to children's social care, and a bit to make it a little less scary really. Some of what I will cover will echo what Julie's covered. I guess it's important to first know what a social worker is. So social workers support people and their families through tough times and ensure that vulnerable people, both children and adults, are kept safe from harm. We often refer to this as safeguarding, so that's probably a term that you've heard a lot. Social workers can be employed in lots of different settings. many people do not necessarily hear about other settings, but you do get social workers in places like prisons, youth justice service, children's homes and charities. We're supposed to be guides and advocates in supporting people to find solutions to their problems. Most social workers do work in local authorities in an adult social care setting or a children's social care setting. So what should you expect if you make a referral for your child because you need support, or if somebody refers your child to children's social care? I guess this would depend on the support requested or the level of concern that is reported. It could be that our referral and assessment team, which is essentially the team that takes the call, so to speak, feels that actually signposting to other support services or to our early intervention services is the best thing to do, as this could meet a child's support needs, meaning that a social worker does not necessarily need to be allocated. It may be that the referral and assessment team feels that more information is needed to make a good decision, and therefore something that we call a child and family assessment could be done. This is the process whereby a social worker will look into all the areas of your child's needs in relation to their development, the parenting that they're receiving and their environment. If you were to look up the assessment triangle, that is what we use to look at needs. The social worker will write their findings onto a document, which becomes the child and family assessment, and they'll decide if your child has support needs that require support from a social worker, or again, you could be signposted after the assessment. It depends on what the outcome of it is. You'd usually be consulted about the assessment and your consent would be sought, although sometimes if the concerns for a child's welfare are high, getting consent is good practice, but we do not need to carry this out for an assessment if we are really, really worried. If it is decided that your child should have a social worker, then the social worker would need to come from the right team in order to meet the child's needs. As noted, I work within the vulnerable adolescents team, and so an at-risk teenager may benefit from receiving support from my team, whereas other children may suit support from a family intervention team or even the children with disabilities team. The majority of the time we offer to support a child under a child in need plan. A child in need plan is a written document that outlines actions that can be followed through with to make the family situation better for the parent and the child. Sorry, the child is at the forefront. Parents, children and other professionals should all have input on this plan. Social workers should want to work in partnership and empower families wherever possible. Sometimes after assessment, though, it could be decided that there is a lot of risk to a child and that the support offered should be in the form of a child protection plan. This plan reflects that children's social care are very worried about the child. The plan looks very similar to a child in need plan, but is agreed at a child protection case conference. So a child protection case conference is a meeting that feels a little bit more formal, whereby all the professionals and the family come together and look at the risks and strengths in a family situation and make a plan to support that is hoped to reduce the risk to the child. We all like for these plans to be in partnership with the parents, but because of risk, there may be some expectations set by children's social care that we will want parents to meet. I guess, regardless of what plan a child is supported on, plans are regularly reviewed, as this holds everybody accountable for their part, including social workers, and it helps us to measure progress in a child's situation. It helps us to see if a plan is working or not and decide on what needs to happen next. Making referrals and working with other services is often included in the plan. If there's a specific area of support needed in relation to, say, domestic abuse or parenting or exploitation, for example, we would seek to get more specialist professionals on board with plans. Social workers tend to be the lead professional, and we do some work directly with children and families, but a lot of our role is ensuring that everybody comes together and is doing what's needed to better the situation. I think that what is important to note is children's services social workers are allocated to your child and not to you. This can obviously cause some disagreement at times, as we will always advocate for and on behalf of the child. However, we take a holistic approach, and what we accept is that supporting parents is absolutely crucial in making children safer and happier. You are the ones caring for them at the end of the day. One of the areas that I've been asked to address, and it's something that Julie's also addressed, is that parents can worry about social services taking their children. As a parent, this is understandably a massive worry. Sadly, sometimes children do get taken into care, and I say sadly because it's not what anybody wants. And again, Julie's already mentioned that, and I'll break down why shortly. I'm mindful that I don't know who is listening on this webinar, and I'm unaware of what everybody's experiences are. If anybody is listening that has had a child taken away, that's a truly heartbreaking experience. And what I say next is not to undermine what you've been through. But what I can say for sure is that children being taken into care is unusual. Many children have social workers, and a very low percentage of them are at risk of going into care or will go into care. From my experience, the case being taken to court rarely happens. Most social workers would describe even having one case a year as a bad case, as it's a bad year for that to happen. The reason children do not just get taken into care is because a lot of cases referred to children's services do not even meet the criteria for the child to be allocated to a social worker, and they can be referred on and signposted to other services. The vast majority of cases that do require a social worker do not anywhere near meet the threshold for court proceedings to even be considered. Those cases are usually supported under a child in need plan, which is partnership working with parents to better support the children. The emphasis is on partnership. We're supposed to do it together. It's not something that is done to you. If significant concerns are apparent in a case, there are so many things in place to try to prevent any immediate decisions to try to take children away. And these cases are usually initially supported through the child protection plans. Today, I wanted to highlight a very key piece of legislation that children's social workers work under, the Children's Act. For a child to go into care on a more permanent basis without a parent's consent, the local authority has to have a care order of some sort, which can only be issued by a judge in court. The Children's Act upholds something called a no order principle. This means that wherever possible, social workers must avoid trying to get an order from the court to take a child away. In addition to this, you and your children have rights, and any breach of these rights must be justifiable. It may not feel like it's you as parents sometimes, but social workers practice under a set of ethics and values, and we have to respect and empower families. Breaking families up and overpowering them unnecessarily completely breaches these ethics and values. So to work towards taking any child away must be completely justified, and literally every other option must have been explored. In addition to that, as a social worker, for example, I would not be solely responsible for deciding to take a case to court. I would have to go through a process that's a little bit like an obstacle course, whereby I would be challenged every single step of the way by management and solicitors. And this is something that's in place to protect your rights and to make sure that children aren't taken away unnecessarily. I guess I wanted to highlight that just to demonstrate how difficult it is for children's services to try to take children away. Even when parents, for example, as mentioned, I work in a vulnerable adolescence team, sometimes parents beg me to take children away. They're teenagers, they're at the end of their tether, you know, their behaviours are just so bad. And even then, I advocate for the children to be at home the majority of the time. So, you know, being completely realistic, sometimes that there is a huge risk to children, and we know that some children can go into care, but that just really isn't the norm. So I guess what I must stress again is that although children going into care and care orders and all of those shenanigans does happen, it's a very low percentage of cases. Nobody is just going to seek to take your children away because you're struggling or you need help. So I'd urge that anybody who requires support reaches out and gets that support. Things are more likely to spiral out of control if you do not seek the help. Children's social care are there to help you make things better so that we have happier children all around. If you do not feel comfortable seeking help for yourself, you could ask somebody that you trust, like a school teacher or a family member, to try to seek that support for you. I think what's really important is that I try to humanise social workers a little bit for you. I feel when you feel nervous about home visits, or you're going to have to go to a big meeting and you're worried about what's going to happen with all the professionals at it, sometimes we can feel nervous as well. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous about talking today. So, you know, it's a very difficult scenario for parents, I understand that, but when you feel overwhelmed when a social worker challenges you, try to remember that social workers are experts at challenging, because behind the scenes they're constantly being challenged too by more powerful and experienced people. Communicate how you feel with us, because none of us return to the office and report to be really glad that we made somebody feel bad. We worry that we could have done better. When your child is allocated a social worker, we're on a journey together to make things better.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kay. That's really been very informative. Thank you. And again, the good news is that I think you mentioned one a year was a bad year. One child going into care was a bad year. So that really does put things into perspective for parents, and they can see that there's so many obstacles before, you know, that happening. So that is a good thing, that, as you say, we want to keep as many children at home as possible. So that is a good thing. Okay, so our next speaker, I noticed we don't have any questions. Please do feel free to write your questions in the Q&A, and we will get a chance to try and answer some either here this evening, or certainly the speakers will write their answers for you. So don't be shy. Okay, our next speaker is Holly Mogridge. Holly is the Integration and Participation Worker at Couth, a free, safe and anonymous online service for young people in Hillingdon aged 11 to 25. Holly's role is to ensure that all young people in Hillingdon are aware that they have this free mental health support service. She does this by hosting mental health workshops and professional healthcare training sessions. She is also an emotional wellbeing practitioner, providing interventions and support to those accessing the service. She has an undergraduate and postgraduate degrees in psychology, and she has experience working in a school for pupils with educational needs, and has done volunteering work with young people in counselling and in clinical settings.
Thank you so much for having me today. I am Holly and I work for the company Couth. So Couth is a paid for service, so it's completely free for young people in Hillingdon to use. So any young person 11 to 25 can sign on and access this service. So it's anonymous, so they create a username. We don't want to know anything about them. That's what makes Couth so amazing. We don't want to know their name. We don't want to know where they go to school, nothing like that. It's all completely anonymous. The only thing we ask from young people is their general location. So it could be Hillingdon, Uxbridge, but it's never more specific than that. And then once young people come on, they can then use self-help tools. So we've got articles, magazine posts, different self-help tools, and then we've got the chance to speak to a counsellor. So they can speak to counsellors or emotional wellbeing practitioners like myself, all anonymous, all text-based. So to sign up, all young people have to do is to go onto couth.com. I've got some data that we found from our users. So since the first lockdown, users on our site, loneliness has come up 43%, sadness 153%, and eating issues are on the rise 56%. So this is all from last year, showing that young people need a safe space for them to speak about whatever they're going through. So that's why I'm here, just to let you know that this service is available for young people to use. It's free and it will be free, so young people can speak to counsellors completely free. But yes, thank you so much for letting me speak this evening. Thank you so much.
Wonderful, thank you very much indeed. That's great. So that's Holly. Okay, so our next speaker is Sgt Ian Benjamin from the Metropolitan Police. Sgt Ian Benjamin has been a police officer for over 30 years. He's worked in Westminster and West London, and he has worked in custody and response teams. He now leads the Metropolitan Police West Area Youth Engagement Team, which is dedicated to delivering a multitude of informative programmes to West London youth. Sgt Ian Benjamin.
My name's Ian Benjamin. I'm the Metropolitan Police Sergeant for the Youth Engagement Team in West London. It's a very new role. We've only been going since 2018, and I was given it very much as a bit of a poison chalice. However, I would say it's the most entertaining and rewarding job I've ever had in the police service, and I wish I'd done it years ago. So my main role is not necessary to go into schools. We have a dedicated schools department which cover all the secondary schools in Hillingdon. We also have a youth justice team which covers Hillingdon as well, and I sort of sit between the two. So I have a sort of role and a free reign to do what I like, as long as it seems to be engaging with the local communities and particularly the young adults. And we tend to range from year 5 up until the age of 24. Now, some people say, why are you going to year 5? Well, if I tell you that I'm going into schools in Ruislip and being confronted by teachers who are telling me that they've got children running around the playground pretending they're stabbing one another and getting robbed as a game, I think we've got a bit of a problem. So we have many initiatives which we do. We've got one called Your Life You Choose, which is aimed specifically at year 7 children, and that's a whole day multi-agency approach which is done in the schools, and that will cover such things as police, what you do if you get caught with a knife and things like that, what happens if you get arrested. We also have the ambulance service, do a very, very good presentation, and that's done by a lady who sadly lost her son to a murder in Greenford about 10 years ago. So it's quite emotive, and it certainly keeps the children interested. We also go and talk to them quite heavily about county lines and exploitation, because sadly there is quite clearly an issue with vulnerability with some people. I think it must be a very daunting experience for a child going from year 6 to year 7 into a very, very large school, and going from being the big fish to the very small fish. And then you've got all these people wanting to know you and come and speak to me. We've got these nice shoes. Do you want them? And things like this. And these people really don't understand what's happening. They just think they've got a very, very good friend. And we're trying to press upon them that there's no such thing as a free lunch, that these people actually want something from them. Because I sit there and I talk to these young people about how they can be exploited, particularly young females, because I think they get left out of the loop a lot, because they are incredibly vulnerable. If you get a young female in a gang, well, the world's the oyster, because young females don't get searched. So sadly, the young female will get exploited, carry these drugs, carry these guns, carries his knife, and it does happen. So we have to have quite a full and frank discussion about how people look to exploit you. Of course, we're going to speak about drugs as well, and that's quite good as well. But we have deviated, and we have started to do it into year 6, which is quite interesting, because there's quite clearly a need there. And the number of teachers who come and speak to us and say, we need this more, because these children are really, really vulnerable. However, saying that, we are beginning to actually do sorts of presentations to parents, because when I was young and I got a letter from the teacher, that very rarely got home. Being a bit older now, I think the same is true now, that parents are quite naive in respect of what's happening to their children when they're leaving school and they're hanging around fast food and things, and how people will target them to exploit them. So that's one part of our role. We also do another thing. We sort of do a bit of confidence building. Sometimes you'll find children who in the pupil referral units a little bit down in confidence and things like that. They will come and work with us in the fire brigade for 2 days. So that's the added draw, that they will come and see us. We'll take them down to Invercourt in Surrey, and they get to play fireman for 2 days. They get all the equipment, start doing drills and things like that, running out hoses, getting the ladders out, putting the breathing apparatus on. And it's quite remarkable when you see these children when they arrive on day 1, they're quite cocksure, don't want to get involved. Day 2, there they are in the uniforms, having their photographs taken with the head of the fire service or the head of the police in that area. They are so proud, and then they're getting these certificates to show they've actually got some sort of achievement. So that's quite nice. And we also do that with the army as well. And you think, oh my God, we're working with the army, we're going to send them to join the army. No, the army have got the best Meccano set in the country. And again, it's quite good to see how these children react to these different scenarios. When you taking them out of their comfort zone, what you're achieving and what you're seeing is completely out of context and what your expectations are. I did a very good lesson at a youth club in Hillingdon where we did some sort of exercises, and the social workers just stood there in amazement and say, what's these children who many people have just written off, to see them work as a team. Absolutely fascinating. So that's how we're looking to work it through, is we will go and speak to anybody, any children, any adult about anything. And people say to us, well, why are you going to speak to the good kids in Scouts or Girl Guides? And I said, well, think about peer pressure. Who's that young child going to speak to the following day when they go back to school? So they're going to go to school and spread what they've been told again. And at the rate we're going this year, even though we are in a COVID safe environment, we've already given presentations to in excess of 10,000 children in West London, which I think is quite a substantial achievement already, talking about the vulnerability and how they can be exploited. And I think by the end of July, we're probably looking at about 15,000 in West London. So I think we're doing something right. And for a department which started 2 years ago, I think that's quite a good thing. But we're always happy to speak to anybody about the police service and break down those stereotypical views, particularly around stop and search, because when we do that, we always do a role reversal, have the youngsters doing the stopping and searching us, and it's quite interesting to see how their reactions are. So that's what we do. Back to you, Meave.
Great, many thanks indeed. Okay, so I just want to recap a little bit. So Holly mentioned about 153%, I think she said, young people suffering with sadness, eating disorders, 56%. And Ian mentioned the fact that he felt that some parents were quite naive in terms of not knowing what their children are getting up to. I think it's really our responsibility as parents to know where our children are at all times. And if we can enlist the help of others to help our children, that's got to be a good thing. So it's just for us to kind of think about what more could we be doing as parents to help our young children. So I just put that out there. I noticed in the Q&A, Carlo, I think we've got a few questions there. Do you want to just raise a few that maybe we could just put to the panel before we ask Fitzroy to speak next?
Yes. We have a question. How are the parents to find out about the services that are available if they cannot speak English and they don't know how to approach services or how to ask for help?
So Julie, do you want to take that one?
Okay, that's a really good question. And I think probably at the moment it is a bit scattergun. We clearly do have access to information in different languages. It's available in different places. We also have access to interpreting services. But what we are also doing at this moment in time with Brilliant Parents is actually setting up a website, which will hopefully be a parenting landing page, which will hold information about all the services. And again, we'll be looking at community languages for that. So it has been a bit of a gap, and depends on who you raise the issue with, where you get the information. In Hillingdon's own website, there's a lot of information from the Family Information Service, but we have acknowledged that as a gap, and the plan is hopefully you'll have to put up with Eve and myself again, welcome you to that webpage, but hopefully we'll really build on that, and that'll be a great resource. That's a one-stop shop, really, that you can go there and find what you need for what you need at that time. So just watch this space, and any other suggestions are always more than welcome. We'll take any hints and tips.
Great. Any more questions, Carla?
Thank you, Julie. We have a question for Holly. How can we refer young people to your service?
That's a brilliant question. Thank you so much. So young people self-refer, so they sign up themselves. So all you need to do is let them know that this service is available, and then any device that can connect to the internet, so whether or not they want to use their phone, laptop, computer, anything like that, they've just got to go onto Couth, so KOOTH.com, and they can sign up themselves. So it's completely up to them.
Carla, any more?
No, that's it.
That's it for now. Okay.
Yes.
Well, do keep, putting the questions down. That's why we're here, to answer any questions that you have. So please do write some more down. Okay, so our next speaker is Fitzroy Lee. Fitzroy is a criminal defense lawyer and has over 20 years experience. And over a number of years, Fitzroy has represented clients in a wide range of cases in terms of their seriousness, ranging from simple theft to more serious offences, such as possession of firearms and murder. A number of these cases have attracted a high level of publicity, both locally and further afield. Fitzroy, can you?
Thank you for the introduction, Maeve. Today I'm going to focus on my role as a duty solicitor, and with particular reference to the role of an appropriate adult if any of the parents find themselves in a situation where they need to assist their young person at a police station. And also what I say, not only is it relevant to young people up to the age of 17, the cutoff point being 18 years of age, but also in relation to adults who may have difficulties such as autism, ADHD, anything where they would need an appropriate adult to assist them in the police station. Firstly, every person arrested has three basic rights on arrival at a police station. Firstly, to have someone informed that they are there. There is a misconception that means that they're literally given a phone and they can ring the parent or friend and say, I'm here, this is what's happening. But it's actually a right not to be incommunicado unless certain exceptions apply. So it's a right for the sergeant or the jailer to contact the relative and say, this person is in the station for these reasons, and if necessary, we'll contact you further. That's the first thing. The second thing is they have a right to consult the codes of practice which governs their treatment whilst they're being detained. Obviously, I'm not going to go into the codes of practice here, but just so that everyone is aware that they have that right as it stands. Thirdly, and very importantly, the right to have independent legal advice. So that means that if you as a family, if you have a lawyer that acts for you, and I would say provided they are a criminal defense lawyer, if you provide those details to the custody sergeant, he will ring their details through to the call center, and then the lawyer will ring in and speak to your young person. If you don't have your own solicitor, you can opt for the duty solicitor. And I want to stress there is an urban myth that the duty solicitor is somehow connected with the police, that he might be a grass, he might stitch up your relative. That's not the case. I've been a duty solicitor since 1996. I've been qualified as a criminal defense lawyer for 30 years. We all take it in turns to be on duty. And I would say it's very important to exercise your right to legal advice, no matter how minor the situation or the allegation may appear. With the case of young people, it's often the case that they won't exercise that right and they will decline that right when they're presented to the sergeant on arrival. An appropriate adult, you'll be contacted by the custody sergeant to inform you that your relative is in the station and that you'll be required to assist at some point. And on arrival at the police station, those rights will be given again to the young person or person under a disability in your presence. And you are within your rights to then exercise the right for legal advice or the other rights in their favor. So do not feel that you are fettered by the fact that the young person has decided they don't want a solicitor for whatever reason. It's within your ambit to say, no, I want them to have a lawyer to be assisted in this process. And in my experience, that is the most important decision that you can make on their behalf whilst they're in custody, because how they deal with the interview process will have a major bearing on how the case pans out in the long run. So as an appropriate adult, you can expect to receive a phone call. You can expect to be asked to attend the station for interview. And on your arrival, those rights will be read over again in your presence. If you elect for a solicitor, the likes of me will attend when the officer is ready to interview the suspect, whether they're an adult or a young person. At that point, the officer will give me information as to what the allegation is, and then I will consult with my client, and that consultation will be in private prior to interview. Now, if you act as an appropriate adult and you're called to the station, and if the duty solicitor decides to exclude you from that process, you may be alarmed. My advice is don't be alarmed. It's done for a good reason, to protect your young person. That conversation between the solicitor and the young person is subject to legal privilege. What that person tells me, the client tells me, cannot be disclosed by anybody other than the young person. If the adult is involved in that process, they are not bound by that privilege, and in interview, they could disclose inadvertently what's been said between the solicitor and the client. So that is the reason why often a solicitor will do that consultation without the appropriate adult. And I, for one, 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, I would do that consultation without the appropriate adult. The only exception is if I feel that the young person is under a particular disability and that the communication would be more effective with the appropriate adult in the room, then I will ask the appropriate adult to remain and ask them to observe the privilege, which strictly speaking, they're not bound by. So just to clarify, what is the role of an appropriate adult in the police station? The role of the appropriate adult is to facilitate communication between the suspect, the police officers, and the legal advisor to ensure that and safeguard their welfare, and to be satisfied that they can participate effectively in the process. So the person is maybe worried, confused. It may be their first time in the police station. If they have particular disabilities, ADHD or autism, then the appropriate adult is there to assist so that they can participate effectively in the process, make sure that they can communicate and that they're calm and they're not flustered. So, as I said, my usual procedure would be to speak to the client, then after the consultation, allow the appropriate adult in to check on their welfare, and then we will go into the interview. Another tip for appropriate adults is during the interview, your role is to assist. So if the young person doesn't understand the question, to put the question in another way. The role of the appropriate adult isn't to answer questions for them or to undermine the advice that's been given. So, classic example, for whatever reason, having received instructions, I may advise the client not to answer the questions. And during the interview, when the client is saying no comment, the appropriate adult may be alarmed or may think that isn't the way to approach it, because they may have ideas around being honest and doing the right thing, as it were. But my role is to ensure that the suspect has the best legal advice, and therefore what you don't want is an appropriate adult undermining that process, but more facilitating communication, making sure the appropriate adult understands. So the key roles of the appropriate adult will be when the rights are given on arrival and during the interview process. Then after an interview, usually with young people, especially where they haven't been arrested before, normally the case will be referred to a youth offending panel, which will consist of social workers and officers who deal with young people, to decide on an appropriate disposal as to whether the matter does have to proceed to court or whether it can be dealt with by way of an out of court disposal. So in a nutshell, that's really how the process works. And obviously I'll deal with any questions afterwards.
Thank you very much, Fitzroy. That was really very interesting. I think for me, listening to you, it's probably one of the few times that I've ever felt as a parent that I might not be an appropriate adult, as it were. That, you know, in certain instances there are adults who are more appropriate than a parent, because as a parent you would go in there sometimes and say, well, you know, tell the truth, and you're saying, well, actually that may not be as appropriate as one would think. So thank you for that. I know we've got some questions that have come in. We have a lot of young who have been convicted because they have been guilty by association. How do we avoid this?
Well, the joint enterprise. Well, I think, as I said earlier, the first thing is, if you're in a situation where you're acting as an appropriate adult, please elect for legal advice. It's better to have the duty solicitor than no solicitor, because what a suspect says in the interview, as my friend Shaun will endorse, is critical to the outcome of the case. So that's the first thing. If you have a solicitor who's worth their salt, they will give good advice so that the young person can answer the questions properly. I have a lot of young people approach me, a lot of suspects, and say to me, oh, joint enterprise, it's been abolished, hasn't it? It's gone now. There was that case. Well, it hasn't been abolished. It is one of the most problematic areas of criminal law, and there are a lot of defense lawyers at the bar and solicitors who are campaigning to make changes to that law. But as it stands, it is still there. So it's very important to have the right advice and to answer questions or not as advised. In a nutshell, what joint enterprise relates to is two or more persons acting together for a joint purpose, for a criminal purpose. So as we say, mere presence is not sufficient. To try and give you a simple kind of examples, if I'm outside a property and my friend goes in, says, my mate lives here, he goes inside, and I genuinely accept that, he goes in, he comes out with what appears to be stolen goods, mere presence isn't enough for me to be convicted by association, as the questioner put it. If I've arrived there and I'm there to lend assistance, to be the lookout man, to help with the getaway, then that is different. So as far as it goes, it's important to exercise the right to legal advice, to get good advice. And apart from everything else, there are many organizations who are still campaigning insofar as the law of joint enterprise is concerned.
Thank you very much, Fitzroy. Carla, could we have a couple more questions, please?
We have a question from anonymous attendee. How does Couth work with young people who make disclosures that are safeguarding issues?
Brilliant. Yeah, that is such a great question. I get that quite a lot because obviously Couth is anonymous. It flags up a lot of like, oh, we're encouraging young people to speak to professionals online without showing who they are, but it's completely safe. So all of our counsellors and our emotional wellbeing practitioners are trained to de-escalate the situation. So what that could look like, working directly with that young person to create a safety plan to try to minimise any behaviours that may be risky. If we think that young person is in direct danger or like an immediate crisis, what we do is we try to build up a report with that young person to get their personal information. And 9 times out of 10, when a young person is in distress and they are in crisis, they will share that information. And we then send the appropriate services. So it could be giving their details onto social services. It could be giving their information onto the police, depending on what is needed. But our clinical and safeguarding hire team do that on a case-to-case basis. If a young person doesn't want to give their information, that's absolutely fine because it's up to that young person. We would just keep that young person safe in the Couth space, for example. So what that means is we'll be inviting them to come back and speak to a counsellor. So it could be come back tomorrow and have another chat with the counsellor, or come back next week and let us know how things are going. That way we can keep a really close eye on that young person, and we also will be messaging that young person and sending them messages throughout regardless of whether or not they're in a session, just so they can have these wellbeing chats to check on how they are going. So hopefully that answered the question.
Lovely, thank you very much. And one more question, please, Carla, before we ask Shaun to speak.
I have a question for Julie. Are the SW trained in therapeutic parenting? There seems to be a trend, not necessarily in Hillingdon, to blame parents for children's behaviour without consideration of the reasons sitting underneath the behaviour.
Thank you for that. And that saved me a bit of typing because I was busy trying to answer the questions that I could while listening to the others. The answer is yes. And I think we're very lucky because we have a multi-agency psychology team that sits alongside our social workers who provide training for the social workers, but also individual consultations if it's around a particular child or a behaviour. They support our looked after children and our children from early intervention throughout. We also, in our training programme, have particular experts that will come and deliver specific training. So there is a range of programming. We do try not to blame parents. And as a parent myself, I'm sure there's some things that I've done that maybe haven't been quite right, but it's about learning from that and maybe looking at alternatives. But we do look at the therapeutic models, ensuring that our social workers are appropriately trained and have the right knowledge base.
Lovely. Thank you so much. That's really good. Thank you. I hope all these answers are really helping you. Okay, so our next speaker is Shaun Wallace. Shaun is otherwise known as the Dart Destroyer from ITV's quiz show, but tonight he's here in his capacity as a barrister. Shaun is an English barrister, lecturer and television personality of Jamaican descent. He's a chaser on the ITV quiz show, The Chase, and a part-time lecturer, and visits schools, colleges and other institutions to educate students on aspects of law. In 2001, he won Mastermind. Shaun, thank you very much. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you very much for that introduction. Actually, I won Mastermind in 2004 and not 2001. But I'm here to talk about my television career. I'm here to actually talk about the fact that I'm a barrister first and foremost. I've been a barrister for the last 35 years. And I work very closely with my good friend and colleague, Fitzroy Lee. Essentially, I'm a criminal defence barrister, and I'll soon talk about the role of a barrister in due course. But the point I wanted to make in relation to how barristers get involved in the process so far as when young people are involved, if I have to take myself out of my body experience as a barrister, the last thing I would want is a young person to be involved in the criminal process, because that means basically they've either been arrested or on the other aspect, so far as the very point that Kelly touched upon, as a last resort, a barrister may be used in the proceedings so far as determining the child's future, so far as care proceedings. Because I think Kelly touched upon a point, and she didn't, I'm going to make the point forcefully as a matter of law, that the interest of the child is always deemed to be paramount. And I'm sure Julie and indeed Carol know what I'm talking about that in relation to the respective spheres they work in relation to children. As a barrister, the role of a barrister is essentially an advocate. And although, as I say, both myself and Fitzroy are essentially lawyers under that same umbrella, there was traditionally the artificial distinction between the role of a barrister and a role of a solicitor. Now, you heard Fitzroy go into a very helpful and extensive detail in relation to the role of a solicitor in the criminal process. The role of a barrister when it comes to being involved in that trial process would come about whereby that young person would be charged by the police in relation to any offence he or she may have alleged to have committed. And as Fitzroy quite rightly pointed out, the criminal responsibility for a young child starts from the age of 10 to 17. So in relation to if a young child has been charged and has been introduced into the trial process situation, they will normally take part in the youth court. And obviously in relation to the way in which those proceedings are conducted, they try and make it less daunting and less formal in order to make any person involved in that process, ranging from the child and the parents, to feel more at ease in relation to the way in which they're brought through the trial process. And if the nature of the offence committed by the young child is serious enough for it to be conducted in the Crown Court, then there is a protocol whereby, again, in order to actually make the process much more less daunting for the young child or the young person, for barristers to actually remove their wigs. Because it's important that in relation to children who are involved in the process, in the trial process, in terms of giving evidence, that the best way in order for them to give their evidence is for them to actually give that in a sort of relaxed and calm environment in order to get the best evidence from that young child. Although I talked about the separation of the roles of the barrister, the solicitor, if I was to basically explain it in the simplistic terms, it would be if I was to use it in the sort of medical context. If you needed legal advice, the first person you would go to would be a solicitor, and if you needed specialist advocacy advice, that solicitor would then instruct a barrister. But to all intents and purposes, as I say, the modern practice of the legal profession has seen the rise of solicitor advocates. So although Fitzroy had mentioned the fact that he essentially goes to court, goes to the police station to represent clients, he does have the right to actually appear in the higher courts to actually represent clients, and he's done so successfully over the number of years that me and him have been working together. Another important aspect I think is important to touch upon: how do you forward the services of a lawyer? People are always worried about in relation to how do we afford the services of a lawyer. And now, obviously, we do have a criminal legal aid. Well, we have a legal aid system which has been going for the last 72 years, but that's been chronically underfunded, sadly, over the last 20 to 30 years. And although people do have the right to free legal representation, that now is subject to very stringent criteria, especially in relation to the respective income of the family, because obviously a young person, although he or she may be the person involved in the criminal process, nevertheless the courts do take into account the financial wherewithal and financial means of the family to determine whether or not either free legal aid is given or legal aid subject to contributions made by the family. So it's very, very important to realise that there still is that system of free legal aid, but it is subject to very, very stringent conditions which you must overcome before you may be entitled to receive it. Otherwise, as I say, we'd be back to the situation whereby you have to actually engage the services of a lawyer privately, and that can be very, very expensive indeed. So there are other ways and means in which you can instruct the services of a barrister, even direct, because most barristers have what's known as the direct access scheme, whereby although the usual traditional route of engaging the service of a barrister would be to go through a solicitor, there are situations whereby barristers' chambers, which are the offices from which barristers operate, they offer what's known as a direct access scheme, which has been going for the last 21 years. And that will allow members of the public to instruct a barrister direct for his or her specialist legal advice. Now, by and large, as I say, most ordinary people are law-abiding, and they don't know how to access the services of solicitors in the first place, unless something happens to them. For example, if their young child is involved in some form of allegation of a criminal offence, or as Kelly has touched upon, whereby as a last resort, the social services of the local authority may deem it important in the child's best interest, unquote, to institute care proceedings. So in those types of situations, how do you access, or how do you know what type of solicitors to go to, and so on and so forth? Because, as I say, there are solicitors on the high street, but as I say, because of the fact that most of those solicitors do offer basically essentially legal aid type of firms, that's the only way a person can engage the services of a solicitor in order to actually seek any legal advice or representation in the future. I've also been asked to touch upon why would a parent need both a solicitor and barrister? Well, ostensibly that's the normal traditional route. I think I've touched upon the fact that there is a system whereby you can, by way of direct access, go straight to the services of barrister. But again, that's not something which is highly well known or well publicised. So I think the best route I would always advise is to actually seek any legal advice from your local solicitor, and they will, as I say, do have a panel of specialist barristers they would normally turn to in order to actually instruct that barrister of a particular problem you may have. Another important question I'm asked again, can you enlist a barrister on legal aid? Of course. I mean, I'm a legal aid lawyer for all intents and purposes, because I think it's important that everybody should have the right to good and proper representation, as opposed to being out of the reach of good representation on the grounds that they simply cannot afford the services of a barrister. So I think it's important, and most barristers are worth their salt, do support the legal aid system, even though it is chronically underfunded, because it's important that everybody has the right to access to good and proper legal representation if they are involved in the court process. So that's what I want to basically talk about so far as the role of a barrister. As I say, Fitzroy eloquently touched upon the fact that the role he plays. It's important that that you do display the urban myth that duty solicitors, as I say, there is a duty solicitor roster, which all solicitors in a certain catchment area take turns to actually be on, and they're not, and they should not be seen as police lawyers. They are there to actually give independent legal advice. And the point that Fitzroy made in relation to the type of advice he would give his client before interview will always be dependent upon the nature of the advanced disclosure, it's called, in relation to an outline of the allegation which a client is facing, because not all the allegation or all the evidence is available at that particular time, and a solicitor has got to exercise professional judgment in relation to what advice he or she should give to their client based upon the initial disclosure they've been given by a police officer. So the reason why sometimes a solicitor may advise his or her client to go no comment is because of the fact that not all the evidence in relation to the allegation has been disclosed. And there may be situations whereby further evidence may come into play, and a client could compromise his or herself by simply commenting on evidence which they may not be aware of because it's not simply been disclosed. So it's always about professional judgment exercised by a solicitor when they give that advice. And as Fitzroy quite rightly pointed out, any advice or discussion between himself and his respective client is always covered by privilege.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Shaun. That was really informative, really, really informative. I think the two things that have stuck out for me is that the council are not there to take your children away, and the lawyers are not police lawyers. So this is how myths can circulate and we can start believing what's going around in the community when it's really not the case at all. So I hope you're getting the message loud and clear. Carla, do we have any more questions?
Yes, we have a question for Holly from Mariam. How can we recognise signs of depression or mental health on our teens, especially when they are very sensitive and in denial and would not agree to seek help?
Yeah, that is absolutely great question. I was just typing out the answer to it now, but yeah, thank you for letting me say this one out loud. If you notice any of these signs, obviously it's really, really important to talk to the young person. If they don't feel comfortable talking to you, then that's fine. Please don't feel offended. I know it's really easy to be like, oh, they don't want to talk to me, but that's absolutely fine. You just need to make sure that they are comfortable talking to anyone. That's why Couth.com is great, because it's anonymous and no one needs to know they're using it. I'd also recommend booking them a GP appointment and encourage them to go. Say that you'll go with them if they want, or say that they're happy to go on their own. You'll wait for them outside, for example. Just make sure that the ball is in the young person's court and that they feel ready to do whatever they want to do. Don't pressure them into it. what I'm going to do is I'm going to send in your chat a video on Couth, which is a really great way to show them and get them like ready to know about the service, because we've just launched one using social media influencers and YouTube stars. So they might recognize some of the people in the video and they might resonate with that, and then hopefully sign up and speak to a professional. So what I'll do is I'll link that to your question, so do keep an eye out for that in the chat. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Can anybody be an appropriate adult, or do you need specific qualifications? I don't think that's been asked. Fitzroy?
I was trying to type in the answer to that, and then I lost the feed. But in a nutshell, you don't have to have specific qualifications to be an appropriate adult. Normally, the appropriate adult is someone who is connected to the suspect. So it could be a parent or a relative who can assist with the communication. There's certain situations where a parent or a relative may not be able to assist if there's a language barrier, or if there's been previous incidents involving the suspect and the parent, for example. So because of previous situations, then it wouldn't be appropriate for the parent to be the appropriate adult in that situation. And then normally in that situation, what you find is that the officers will contact the appropriate adult service, which is an organisation which is made up of volunteers who are available to give their time to act as the appropriate adult in those circumstances. I would think that they would vet those who join to check that there is no issue with them being an appropriate adult. As far as I'm aware, having previous convictions, just like training to be a solicitor, it's not an absolute bar to becoming an appropriate adult, but clearly there have to be safeguarding issues to check that the person doesn't have any convictions or anything of a nature which would render them a risk or not appropriate to be an appropriate adult. I hope that answers the question.
Lovely, thank you very much, Fitzroy. Okay, so we've heard.
Niamh, sorry, can I just come in on that point? Is that okay? The appropriate adult service is commissioned by yourselves in Hillingdon, and all those volunteers are fully trained, they're DBS checked to ensure that they're a safe and appropriate person. And I think for us, our most recent experience is it can sometimes be done by phone because of COVID or in person, but we really encourage where it can't be a parent, or maybe a parent doesn't feel equipped to, that they actually do that in person. Similarly with their duty solicitor, I think it ensures the sort of best access to justice really, and helps potential diversion from the criminal justice system at the earliest point for young people when they land in a police station.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so we've heard from all our professionals, and now I thought it would be really, I didn't think we could have an event like this without hearing from some parents who have been through the system, as it were, have engaged with social care to different degrees. So our first speaker, our first parent is Mary Smith, and Mary's going to talk to you for a little bit about her experience.
So my son, I'm here because my son was involved with county lines. It's not something you just get into, and it's not something that you just get out of. It was a 15-month period during which our environment and our lives completely changed constantly during that time. A number of things happened during that time. He fell out of education completely. He'd go missing regularly. When he was home, his behaviour was constantly challenging. On one hand, I'd be so grateful he was there just to have him with me, but on the other, he was hyperactive, rude, aggressive, didn't sleep at night, slept all day, was constantly spinning out, which when you realise what they're facing through exploitation is understandable. But like I said, it doesn't just happen. There are some things that kind of led us there, and we'd been living at my parents' home for a few months due to becoming homeless. And during that time, there had been some bouts of domestic violence perpetrated by a family member. And my son was in a constant state of high alert. My mental health wasn't particularly great at that time. And after one particularly bad incident, we went to the council and they found us temporary accommodation in another borough. And it was during that time that my son was first recruited and first went missing. It was the beginning of, it was lockdown. The world had gone into lockdown, and my son went missing for a week. I'd had an inkling he was going to go the week before because a friend of his had gone missing. And through, scrupulously going through his social media and just probing him, just trying to get little bits of information, I realised that what his friend was doing. And I was terrified. I thought, he's going to go. I could just sense it. I could sense in him a change. He was getting quite hyper about things. It was almost like a kind of nervous excitement that I detected in him. So I started love bombing him. I just, anything that would usually make me, respond in a parental way, i.e. make your room tidy, make your room, do this, or get, just certain chores that he would have to do on a daily basis. If he didn't do them, I wasn't giving him a hard time about it at all. I was making all his favourite foods. I was just making sure he knew I was there for him and that I loved him. And when he did go, he messaged me straight away. He left one night. He said, "I'm just going to run a bath," and I was reading my book. And I thought, he's been running that bath a long time. And I went in there and I just knew what had happened. And I called him. He didn't answer, and he texted me and he said, "Don't worry, Mum. I'll be back in a week. I'll be all right. I promise. Don't worry." And I just remember falling to the floor and knowing what was going on and feeling just completely helpless. But of course, I called the police straight away. I texted our social worker. It was 11 o'clock at night. And the police came round and I told them what had happened, and I knew what had happened, and I gave them as much information as I possibly could, things that he'd said to me, what he was wearing, and that was it. He went for a week. On the good thing that happened was that he rang me every single day, or at least messaged and stayed in contact, which I believe is quite not usual. So I was really hanging on to that, and I do think that was a lot to do with the love bombing. I think he had a sense of guilt for going, despite he'd been so angry at me beforehand because of what we'd been going through. So when he came back, I thought, this is it. He's not going to want to go there again. But he did. He was back for a week and then he went again. But this time when he came back, he didn't just come back as he had before. He called me on the Saturday night and he was terrified. I could hear it in his voice, and something bad had happened. And he said, "I need you to come and get me, Mum." And so we worked out a station where I could pick him up from in London, and I drove and I picked him up, and he had machete. He'd had his clothes had been sliced where he'd been threatened with a machete, and he'd had any money that he'd had on him that he was holding for these drug dealers had been robbed, which is a typical thing that happens. So it turns out is that a way of keeping kids enrolled in or keeping them in the environment that they're in, keeping them recruited, is that they will rob them of the money that they have, and then they tell them, "Well, you're going to have to stay with us now. You're not going anywhere. You owe us a debt, and you're going to have to pay it." So when that had happened, he'd gone with a friend this second time, and the friend freaked out and did a runner. My son didn't want to do that because he was scared of what would happen to him if he did that. So he wanted to stay, but after 2 days of staying there on his own, he knew that he didn't want to be there, and he left. But he had a debt with them and they knew where we lived. So once he was back, he was frantic and he was pacing around and he was scared, and I was getting scared, and there were people hanging around outside our house, older teenagers, and I didn't know if we were being paranoid or what was going on. But once those kids left, I packed a bag and we went and stayed at a friend's that night. And the next morning we had a call from the police to tell us that there had been intel that my son was in danger, and could we not stay at the house? So we went and I booked an Airbnb for a week. This is all during lockdown, so we could only do that with the support of our social worker, because only key workers were allowed to be staying in Airbnbs and things at that time. But we went and we stayed for a week, and I tried to calm my child down. During that week, the social services that I was working with, I mean, throughout, I've been talking to missing persons teams daily. I've been talking to social services. I've been talking to the police. We had a police liaison officer who was amazing. And as a team, they managed to get us some more temporary accommodation. And that's how we arrived in Hillingdon. So on arrival in Hillingdon, we had I didn't know anybody there, not a soul. I don't even know if I'd heard of Hillingdon before. Probably I had, but it didn't really register on my radar. Over that period of 5 months, he stayed in, and I thought that was it. He'd had enough to shock him. We had such amazing support. We had such an amazing welcome to Hillingdon. We had a social worker who put together a team which involved a worker from an arm of, there's a charity called St Giles, and they have an arm called Roots and Return, and they allocated my son a worker from there. The school nurse, brilliant parents. There was just, I worked with a psychologist as well for a while to help me understand what my son was experiencing. And all of this came through the social worker. I mean, really, I might have forgotten somebody, but it just felt like we were having a huge warm hug put around us, to be honest with you, in terms of the support we were feeling. I hadn't been able to talk to my family about it. I had a couple of friends who were amazing. And if I've learned anything, having a social support team is vital, as is having a professional support team when your child's going through anything like that. So he started at the school, and I thought things were going to be okay. But ultimately, we got to the summer holidays, and actually, when he'd gone into the school prior, sorry if I'm getting this a bit confused, but he went to the school before the summer holidays. They weren't open properly because of lockdown, but he'd been able to go in there and just see a few key workers and a few people, and just to kind of, they wanted to help him feel settled within the school. So this team knew exactly what he'd gone through, and the safeguarding team there were fantastic in terms of making sure the right people knew, but not everybody knew, because it's a sensitive subject, so it's not something you want everybody knowing, hence why I'm anonymous today in terms of I'm not showing my face. But when after the summer holidays, the thought of coming into school and facing all those students, having not been in education for a while, was too much for him. He got another offer, and he went back into working with a different gang from a local area in Hayes. During that time, he would go missing only for 1 or 2 days. He was better than he was the last time, as in he obviously went in with a lot more strength in saying he wasn't such a young lad anymore, and he had some experience in the whole thing. He would go missing for a day or two, and I have to say I was beside myself. But I'd get a call from the school, and I'd get a call from the school nurse, and I'd get a call everybody was calling in to make sure I was all right. And I think having all of that support just allowed me to keep going, and all I did was focus on my child and focus on my own well-being in order to sort of, keep being as strong as I could for him, so that when he returned, I wasn't a mess on the floor. The place was clean and tidy. There was food in the fridge, and he was coming back to a loving home. I couldn't have done that without the support that I had. I really couldn't have. And there were times where I didn't want to answer the phone to somebody, or I didn't want to. There were many times where I couldn't do anything other than go for a walk, or just have some cook a chicken or something, and then just sit on the sofa and just wait for him to come back. But I kept answering the phone. I kept talking to everybody, and I we got through it. And actually, he's been, we did get through it, and it's not something that I've lost him to. And he is looking at school at courses and things, and he's started to integrate into the local community in a positive way. And he is doing a lot better. It was quite hard fitting all of that into a short amount of time, and I don't know if anyone can nod at me if I run out of time.
You've done amazingly. You have, Mary. Thank you so much. I mean, I don't even know where to begin, really. I can feel and I'm sure we can all feel your pain. And all I can say is that you are incredibly strong to have come through the other end. And the fact that you sought help and you got the help that you needed is testimony to just how strong you are as a mother. So I salute you, Mary, because it's not easy looking after yourself and trying to protect your child at the same time. And as you said, you know, sometimes the judgment and the stigma that is out there is almost too much to bear. So thank you so much for speaking tonight. And as you say, such a short period of time. Our final speaker is Halima Yusuf. Halima, also another parent, is going to talk for 10 minutes or so about her experience with Hillingdon Council. Halima?
Yeah, hello, good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Halima.
Yeah, my name is Halima Yusuf. I am one of parent champion in Brilliant Parent. And I am a mom of 4 young children who has severe, horrible abuse and harassment in the past few years. Sorry. I actually, last year in August, I struggled to deal with my son, who is 14 years. His behavior, about his eating problem and sleeping difficulties. I tried to help him. I speak to the GB, the school. I don't know, they didn't help me that much. After that, I just decided to call the social service for help. Although I am not that confident to call them because of misinformation I had before. But I make that decision that day and I called them, and they sent me a lady who came to us and make an assessment with me and my child. And after that, I got a key worker who's working with me. I got Brilliant Parent courses. It was really helpful for me, what I got. At the same time, my child, he was suffering from severe anxiety, but I didn't know. I don't have any idea about anxiety and all that stuff. Even me, I become emotional and I don't know, I become just, I could not help him for anyway. And we got a psychiatrist, and even the GB come back and talk to us, and he tried to help him, the school, and now he's fine and he get better. All the help we got, especially the idea I got from the Brilliant Parent, the courses I got it from me, it was really helpful for me. And the key worker, it was a wonderful lady who's working with me and helped me for a lot of things. I'm glad he's out now and he got discharged from the therapist and psychiatrist, and we are doing really okay. But it was really helpful, the help we got from social service, and I didn't wait all that help. I don't know, it's just opposite the things I had before. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Halima. Thank you very much. That's wonderful. So there you have 2 parents with 2 totally different experiences, but either way, they've both used the resources from Hillingdon Council and from ourselves, and they've come out the other end. So it really is about being proactive in terms of your children. You know, we are their primary teachers, as it were. And as a parent, we have to be investigators, we have to be counselors, we have to be all manner of things, which we didn't actually know we were signing up to. So, but I think the most important thing is that we can, they say knowledge is power. We have to actively go out there and seek knowledge and find the resources. And we know that budgets are being cut left, right, and centre, but there are still resources out there. And I've been working with Hillingdon Council for the last 10 years in different positions. And I can honestly say that as a borough, in terms of supporting parents, they've got to be amongst the best. I think all that's left for me to say is a huge, huge thank you to all our panelists. I won't say your names, too many to mention. I also want to thank Hillingdon Council, because without Hillingdon Council, we wouldn't be able to put on this amazing event this evening. I'd like to thank brilliant parents, the board of directors and all the staff that have helped to put on this event tonight. And last but by no means least, I'd like to thank the parents, because that's why we're here. Hillingdon parents, all parents, regardless of age, ethnicity, religion, we all want the best for our children. And it's up to us as parents to sometimes come out of our comfort zone, to sometimes set a goal for change, that we want to do something different. We want to get our children to take a different course of action, but they will only take that different course of action if we take a different course of action. So it might be that we have to say, okay, I've heard a lot of rumors, but I'm going to step out. I'm going to step out because I'm going to do this for my child. And that's what Mary Smith did. That's what Halima did. And they've spoken about how well they did on that journey. So I hope that after this evening, you feel more inspired. I hope you feel more encouraged to get in contact with Brilliant Parents. Our contact details are on the screen. And if you need to contact us to get through to Hillingdon Council because you feel a little bit more comfortable, then that's what we're here for. So thank you all very, very much. And we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you. Good night.